In this video, I'm going to talk about just some of the topics that we did not cover in this course. The C# programming language, here's the specification. It's huge. It's 800 pages long plus. There are dozens and dozens of different programming language features that are in this language. They range from the quite straightforward features that people use every day to some that are very arcane, that are used by only the geekiest of programming geeks. So I'm going to show you just a few features in object-oriented programming that we didn't get to in this course. These are some of my favorite features in C#. So far, we've only seen programs that had a single class in them called program. Right? That's really pretty boring class. You typically use classes to represent collections of data, right, that you can do something interesting to. So for example, here I might have a class called address, and it's got a couple of properties in it. This is the syntax for a property in C#. So I would say that there's a property called street. It's a string. And it has a getter and a setter. So this property can be read and written. I might have an address has a property called country, and so on. We would want to have a lot more things in address. Right? And there might be methods in here as well, and not just properties. We could have a class called employee. And an employee similarly could have a property that was the employee's name. We might want to break this down into first name, second name, third name, or we might just want the name. Again, with a getter and a setter. We could have another property called address, whose type is address. So we could reuse this class that we have already encapsulated some concept in our business domain, and we could use it in another concept in our business domain, employee. Fun little feature here. You notice that I have a property called address, whose type is address. C# was very carefully designed so that the language does not get confused when this happens. This is, if you read the specification, this is called the color problem, because you often end up in a situation where you have a type called color, and you want to describe the color of something, and the property has to be called color. So you end up seeing color a lot, or address, or that kind of thing. You notice that all of these are marked as public. We did not talk about code visibility or accessibility at all in this course, but there are different accessibility domains where you can say, well, this piece of information is public so that anybody can see it. This piece of information is private. Only certain code can see it. This bit of code can only be seen by other code in this program, but not by code in other programs, and so on. We can say we have a class of things called manager. And this means a manager is a special kind of employee. So we have this mechanism for code reuse. And this is where things get really sort of object-oriented in the modern sense of the word, right? Where we have these large hierarchies of a manager is a kind of employee, an employee is a kind of person, and so on, right? Where we can then polymorphically treat people as things. We can polymorphically treat managers as people, and so on, right? And there's a lot of interesting and powerful programming techniques we can use there. I've put a property on this thing. This is a kind of type that we haven't seen in this course. This is called a generic type. And it's also a kind of type that we haven't seen in this course called an interface type. So it's a generic interface, right? So this means that I stands for interface. Interfaces traditionally begin with the letter I in C#. So this says, I am an enumerable of employees, or in less jargony terms, the reports of a manager are a sequence of employees. I mean, we saw how you could make collections in the form of arrays. You could say I have an array of employees. A sequence is a more general form than an array, right? Whereas an array is a block of variables that you can access by their index. A sequence is a sequence of values where you can simply read, I want the next one, I want the next one, I want the next one, the way you would iterate over a sequence. And that thing, you could say, well, I want to be able to get and set this thing. We still have our class program. We could still have our main method. Let's suppose that we wanted to have a list of employees, right? So again, we have a generic type. This is read list of employees, and this is a genuine type in C#. So I want to make a new one. And just like we have array initializers, where we could say, I'm going to initialize this array to 10, 20, 30, we can do the same thing here. We can say, I want this collection of employees to have a new employee. I want the employee's address to be a new address. I want the street to be the street address to be 123 Sesame Street, and the country to be the United States, and so on. We could create a whole bunch of these. Once we had a whole bunch of these, then we could start asking questions, right? We could say, well, I would like to know who all the employees are who live in the United States. So I could say, I could introduce a new variable, right? You'll notice if I hover over this thing, it says the variable is of type system collections generic IEnumerable of out t, where t is employee, right? And that this is something enumerable. It gives us a iteration over a collection of a specific type. And then we have this syntax here. This is my favorite syntax in C#. This is called language integrated query. We can say, I want to take every employee in this employee's collection, but I only want the ones who live in the United States, and I want to select that employee, right? Or you could say, I want to select that employee's address, right? Or I want to select that employee's name, right? And so on, right? So give me a sequence of names of employees who live in the United States. And these queries can get very, very complicated. It's a very powerful ability to sort and search and filter and group and join data in C#. So that's just a little example of the kinds of things that you can do in C#, the kinds of business domains that you can represent in object-oriented code, and the way you can slice and dice collections of things. It's a very complex language. It's a very interesting language. I learn new things about this language every day, and I have been working on it for a long time. So summing up, C#, huge language, a lot to learn about. And thanks for watching this course. Once again, if you have any questions, you can always email me at eric@lippert.com. I write a blog about programming language design and C# specifically at ericlippert.com. Now, if you have a specific question about actual code, I encourage you to, rather than mailing it to me, mail it, or don't mail it, post it on stackoverflow.com. But try to make sure that it's a specific question about actual code. A lot of people, a lot of beginners post questions on Stack Overflow that simply aren't answerable because they're too vague. So use that resource, but use it carefully. So thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time.